As a psychologist, I have the privilege of knowing people in ways others don't. And it happens within the sanctity of therapy. That's where private thoughts are revealed and deeply anchored emotions surface. And if we do our job right, perspectives begin to shift. But sometimes only if nudged. It doesn't happen automatically or magically. Let me give you an example. I once asked someone who felt deeply disconnected a simple question. When did you stop believing things could be different? No, not surprisingly, because they didn't expect the question, they didn't answer right away. And I actually applauded that. They contemplated. They thought about it. However, their pause was so long that I began to think they might have forgotten the question of, when did you stop believing things could be different? But I was patient, counted my potatoes, 1 potato, 2 potato, 3 potato. But eventually they said, I didn't stop believing. I just stopped trying. That moment and that answer matters in so many ways because it reflects exactly where the tide either keeps pulling you out or starts to turn. Welcome back to the Rethink Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. David Zierk. This podcast is where we step back and pause, reflect, and explore smarter, more connected ways to lead and live by thinking with connection in mind. That's the tagline to Rethink, thinking with connection in mind, which is exactly what is meant by the word rethink, relationship enhanced thinking, rethink. And what I always encourage people to do is begin rethinking your connections both to yourself and to others and your interactions with the world. I think that's what makes this podcast so unique. We take any topic, any issue, any controversy, and we look at it through the lens of rethinking, thinking with connection in mind. So encouraging people to get out of themselves and asking themselves more from an interpersonal perspective and an interactive perspective. How can I think about this differently? And what's amazing about thinking and rethinking is it helps people to dislodge themselves from their belief systems. I've had a thought that when people think the same thought multiple times, it turns into a belief, which is a good thing. But once a person has an established belief and strongly anchors to it, something amazing happens that no one's aware. They stop thinking. They let their belief system do all the hard work. And that's the reason why there's so much gridlock in our world right now. Because it's not that people are thinking about what other people are thinking or trying to share what you're thinking. I don't think people are thinking. I think people are sharing their belief systems. And they're anchored to their belief systems. They're passionately connected to their beliefs. And as a result of that, there's no communication. If communication doesn't happen, communication fails each and every time. That's the reason why rethinking your connection to yourself and others and your interactions with the world is very provocative. So I want to start today's podcast by reminding you that in part one of this two-part podcast, we explored the parting tide, T.I.D.E., and how people end up feeling trapped, isolated, deprived, and empty. This is what I put up on the board last time. There's the acronym, TIDE, trapped, isolated, deprived, and empty. And this happens in relationships and also in work situations. And we talked about the parting tide. And when these features of the human soul combine, the whole idea of feeling trapped, isolated, deprived, and empty, I look at them as being 4 features of the human soul. Happens to everyone, sometimes with different intensity and frequency. That's how people end up feeling trapped and isolated, deprived, and empty. And the tide of your self-esteem, your self-worth, and your self-identity slowly begins to recede as the tide recedes. It's the reason why this metaphor of the tide is so evocative. And I hope it's very sticky too. So today we're shifting focus to the process of turning the tide. Because while the tide, the T.I.D.E, is powerful, you can change how you interact with it. That's the challenge. And the challenge lies beyond recognizing disconnection, which is important. Totally, it's important. The true challenge is knowing what to do once you see it, once you feel it, once you're experiencing it, without blaming yourself or waiting for someone else to change it first. That's really important, kind of getting ahead of the current. Now, the tide, the T.I.D.E, doesn't just pull us out. It also offers 4 moments of choice. Remember that the parting tide, the first podcast, it symbolizes times when things drift apart, they unravel, and you lose your passion for engagement. That's what the parting tide is all about. It's when life stops offering you the gifts of attention, affection, acknowledgement, approval, and applause. We talked about those attachment needs, those primal needs that you can't give yourself, that you're waiting for other people to give you, and sometimes you end up waiting far too long. And what's interesting is when you do receive what it is that you need, want, desire, and deserve, attention, affection, acknowledgement, approval, and applause, it revises your relationship with your soul. That's what we're waiting for. So when the people around you too often forget you or hurt you or dismiss you, maybe they reject you or treat you with indifference, that's the opposite of these attachment needs. I call them attachment injuries. Then the momentum to move forward slows. It even reverses. And that's the experience of the parting tide. Now, the way the world comes at us, granting us fortunes and imparting misfortunes, it shapes our identity while crafting our souls. It's an amazing process. It shapes our identity, but it also crafts our soul, the depth of who you are and who you were always meant to be. There are things that happen to us that cannot be done. I understand that. We have drama and trauma in our lives. We have victories and valleys. Those are the things that cannot be undone. But sometimes those events, now they offer uplifting presence. But at other times, often too many times, they can carry lasting negativity and what I call the oppressive weight of unfairness. The oppressive weight of unfairness. And in its wake, we end up feeling flawed. Now, that's certainly the downside of this whole matter, because how people treat us or mistreat us determines how we feel about ourselves, to the extent to which our sense of self can be misshaped to the point where we feel flawed. It's what inflames our insecurities, our sense of inadequacy, inferiority, feeling incompetent or inept, feeling incomplete. And if the feeling of flawed is so persistent, we can actually begin to experience what I call insanity, that life doesn't make sense, that we don't fit in with life around us. That's a version of insanity. At least that's the way it feels internally. Now, the bittersweet reminder of our vulnerability and resilience underscores the importance of distinguishing between self-awareness and self-doubt. That's what I just touched on. Being aware that you're lonely, self-doubt, allowing your loneliness to disrupt your sense of self. There's a big difference between self-awareness and self-doubt. Just as there's a huge gap and difference between self-validation and self-deprecation. I think humans are impressively good at invalidating self, putting self down, anticipating rejection, exclusion, and devaluation, far ahead of the opportunity that it may happen. I think we predict it. And so when we predict it, and if it doesn't happen, it still feels like it did happen. That's the power of self-invalidation and the solidity of self-deprecation. We begin to put ourselves down because we believe that we've earned it, that we deserve it. Now, differences in sameness is really important because I don't want you to forget about this contrast between closeness and distance. We need to be close to self, we need to be close to others, but we also sometimes need a distance. But understanding this last contrast of closeness and distance is perhaps the most significant, as maintaining this closeness and connection with those who reflect the person you believe yourself to be. Now, that's priceless. I really do believe that we walk around with a sense of self of who we believe ourselves to be. Now, it can be revised, it can be grown, it can expand, it can evolve. But either way, we have a captured sense of self. And when we interact with other people who reflect back to us the same image that we have of ourselves, that depth of connection with self and others is priceless. So the people around you act as a type of mirror, reflecting back to you images. Some of them are worth cherishing, and others, not so much. Welcome to the challenges of human life, of interacting with other people who are good days and bad days, who can be censored or uncensored. And as these challenges of human life are imparted on us, we begin experiencing what I call the parting tide. Having less confidence in ourselves, not anticipating victories, but expecting and preparing for the valleys. Welcome to knowing that adversity is one of life's inevitabilities. So the next step turns our attention to understanding how riding the tide contributes to the problem. Now remember the problem: trapped, isolated, deprived, and empty. It's the reason why I'm keeping this up on the board. That's the tide. And when the parting tide happens, we just went over that, we feel less connected to self and others and to the world around us. But here's the thing: riding the tide. This is where complacency takes over, and it becomes your default mode. You know something's wrong, but effort feels risky or even exhausting. So you adapt to doing very little. You're expecting even less. And you begin tolerating intolerable behavior from other people. Accepting, no, it's more likely you're surrendering to life's disappointments and discouragements. Now, what's interesting about that is I really do believe that people at large are really good at putting us down, letting us down, and bringing us down. Not everybody, but I do believe the world at large is really good at that. Some people bring us up, pull us up, and lift us up out of our despair. But I think even those people sometimes will let us down. And that's the reason why I do believe this idea that people who could be so uplifting, but they can also be so hurtful, are the primary source of most of human suffering. So with very little effort to improve, you go into complacency, you're riding the tide. And here's the thing: you're not disappointed. Your life stagnates as you continue to ride the tide that keeps receding, and you suppress the instincts that really call for you to move forward to a better life. But instead, again, you suppress those instincts, you stay the course. You keep riding the tide. Now, while this life strategy improves the chances that things don't get worse, your life almost certainly doesn't improve. You can see why the self-perpetuating cycle is really a phenomenon that happens to so many of us. As your expectations remain low, the lack of fulfillment you experience becomes well expected and in a way kind of strangely rewarding. I knew it wasn't going to work out, so you predicted an unfortunate future. That unfortunate, unwanted, uninvited future happened. You anticipated it. See? This is when your life comes to a standstill, when you begin anticipating or predicting negativity, and it happens. You can see why avoidance becomes so powerful, very powerful coping mechanisms. Sometimes some of us avoid very passively, just by disconnecting, distancing ourselves from others, maybe distracting ourselves with an activity such as looking into our phone and doing whatever it is that we do there for too long. Some of us actively avoid by engaging in really unhealthy behaviors like substance abuse or alcohol or other forms of addiction like retail shopping too much or gambling, and it goes on and on. So after riding the tide for too long, I would suggest to you, it's time to shift. This begins when you realize that you've mastered self-preservation, but you deserve more out of life. Remember I said mind's instinct is self-preservation? And because it's an instinct, it becomes a reflex. And we get really, really good at that. But there has to be more to life than just self-preservation. So welcome to stemming the tide. This is the first pivot. So we went from parting tide, then we started riding the tide. Now we're going to begin stemming the tide. Having had your fill of life that stalls rather than advances, you stop making things worse. You stop tolerating intolerable behavior. You stop accepting unacceptable events. Instead, you interrupt old patterns. You pause instead of reacting. Very powerful to pause instead of reacting. You stop compromising and start reclaiming. You catch yourself doing what it is that you've always done that didn't lead anywhere. And you begin saying, maybe I can do something else. That's right. In a sense, you begin trusting your better angels. Stemming the tide begins with an admission. Your past coping cycle kept your head above water, but just only barely. Now, you want more. And you begin to believe you deserve more as well. Congratulations. Very important pivot. Beginning to believe that your sense of self is worthy of something more than you are receiving and something much greater than you have begun to tolerate. You do need, want, desire, and deserve the things that we talked about before, the attention, the affection, acknowledgement, approval, and applause. That's the elixir of life. So when you begin changing the way you look at life and begin thinking that you want more and you begin to believe that you deserve more, this is a great sign. One where out of nowhere there's this flare of optimism and a restoration of hope. Do you feel how that begins stemming the tide? It's a different energy source. Sometimes we know that the tide has its own energy, it's moving in a certain direction, and it becomes so pervasive and so overwhelming that we begin to give up on it. And it becomes our default mode to do nothing, tolerate intolerable behavior. But this new one, this new mindset, is primed with the idea that it all starts with stopping. It's an amazing little phrase. If you want to change your life, if you want to alter a habit, it all starts with stopping. That's the idea of making an admission. Stopping what was preventing you from moving in a positive direction and living the life you need, want, desire, and deserve. There's my phrase. What is it that you need, want, desire, and deserve? Let's begin moving in that direction. That's the power of stemming the tide. Before we move to the next step, I want to underscore something really, really important. That it's okay to be happy and sad, to feel weak and strong, to be hopeful and nervous, to feel powerless, but having an inkling that you could begin flexing your muscles again. That's the paradox of humanity. There's more than one truth about everything, including your sense of self. Welcome to life's journey of ups and downs and twists and turns that become internalized. So we begin experiencing ups and downs and twists and turns, even about our own self-reflections. But stepping back into your life is the next step toward rediscovering your worth and reclaiming your identity. I just really want to emphasize that. Your identity, your sense of self, your self-worth, your self-esteem, your self-concept. We could go on. Having primed the pump, the time has come to turn the tide. Now, we know that we're up against a huge nemesis, because I keep it up on the board: tide, trapped, isolated, deprived, and empty. And when that becomes convincingly present, it's hard to believe that we can do anything to fight back, to kind of decrease the power of that underlying current. But this is where self-worth re-enters the conversation. It is only during such times that your sense of worth is kind of like regained and revalued. Regained and revaluing your sense of worth. You begin to advocate for your needs. Can you believe that? You begin advocating for your needs. You begin stepping up, stepping into situations that provide the opportunity for you to get what you can't give yourself. You teach others how to treat you. You inform them through vulnerability that you do need, want, desire, and deserve some attention, some affection, acknowledgement, approval, or applause. Nothing wrong with asking that. Now, we're going to improve your style of asking, but there's nothing wrong with just asking. But beyond asking for it, you have to remember you have to teach others how to treat you. And you begin engaging with intentionality. Understanding the vital importance of connection, you invite opportunities for others to re-enter your life. And by doing so, you just improve the odds of being rewarded with what you deserve the most: to be given those 5 attachment needs. People start organically attending to you, saying nice things to you, acknowledging you, kind of giving you a thumbs up, and maybe even give you an attaboy, which is a form of an applause. And essentially, this is what life is all about. It's doing you in such a way that you can feel comfortably confident about that, but you do it in such a way that other people reflect back to you an approval, an admission of validation. Receiving from others what you can't give yourself, which elevates your sense of self, your self-esteem, by recognizing that you're worth what you receive from others. I just love the way that plays out. So kind of in a nutshell, change doesn't start with confrontation. It starts with clarity and moves ahead with boldness. So now that we've walked through these different aspects of parting tide, stemming the tide, riding the tide, and turning the tide, let's see how it plays out at work. Riding the tide looks like quietly disengaging, doing your job while emotionally checking out, staying more focused on the file rather than looking ahead and trying to make eye contact with other human beings. You're staying at a safe distance from others, and that keeps you circling the drain while not going down the drain. That is riding the tide. Stemming the tide might mean setting one boundary or naming one unmet expectation. It's a careful, deliberate move that's essential to slow things down and allow a change in direction. And then, turning the tide. It happens when you stop normalizing disconnection and start prioritizing relationships that offer the attention, acknowledgement, and respect that you deserve, that you're craving. This is when you begin to receive what it is that you want the most that you can't give yourself. Validation from others that aligns with your authentic sense of self. That's like the stars are in alignment when that happens. It feels good. It's an uplifting experience. And you probably privately say to yourself, life is good. It's the most intimate part of your life. It's the shift from this is just how it is to this is what I'm not willing to accept anymore. Quite a shift. in terms of how your mind is operating. So let's see if we can put this into action this week. I want you to identify one place, just one place in your life where you've been riding the tide, tolerating what's been happening, and believing you don't have a choice. You're feeling trapped, isolated, deprived, and empty. And you keep tolerating what's been happening, and you believe you don't have a choice. Remember I said the power of belief is that it's important, not always positive, but once we have a belief, we stop thinking. And I'm trying to get people to dispel themselves from their belief, challenge their beliefs, and begin rethinking it, and begin realizing you do have a choice. And then I want you to ask yourself, what's one small action that would stem the tide? Not a dramatic overhaul. We're not looking for an epiphany. We're not an ultimatum, just one choice that honors your worth. Now, stemming the tide is the first step to a new beginning. By doing so, you'll move closer towards turning the tide, which is when you've reconnected with your deepest truth that lies within your true self. That your sense of self is worthy of really clean, healthy, organic connections with other people. Then, having started the process of turning the tide, knowing that it all starts with stopping, you pivot with intentionality, curiosity, and flexibility. You give yourself choices and options. This is the core triad of moving toward having a life you've always deserved. Intentionality, curiosity, and flexibility, in that order. So with all that said, if you felt stuck, numb, or quietly disconnected, I want you to hear this. The tide. It may be really strong. It may be convincingly oppressive, but it responds to intentional movement. That's my promise. On this podcast, we don't just name patterns. We help you reclaim agency, one decision at a time. It's about seeing the big picture, reclaiming your value, and realizing that the stakes could not be higher and that you're worth taking the risk. I'd like to invite you to visit my website at davidzierk.com, where you can sign up for my newsletter called Refresh. You can download a plethora of resources. You can read a blog or two, and you can learn more from my quizzes and begin exploring my different speaker topics. I also have a YouTube channel called Whiteboard Psychology, where I make learning about psychology visible and fun. I take ideas about psychology that might be well understood or even provocative. I put them up on the board with a visual model, and I talk about them for a short period of time, measured just in minutes, because I want you guys to walk away with kind of these knowledge pointers, kind of get a better grip on what may be happening in your life and around you. I also share quick tips on relationship intelligence and turning conflict into connection on YouTube and Instagram, because my overall arching contribution to psychology is the development of relationship intelligence and helping people deal with life's unsolvable problems and learning how conflict can be dealt with and navigated in such a way that you can turn it into a connection. In fact, I really do believe that we really don't ever really get to know each other until we have actually transformed conflict into a connection, because under every conflict is an unmet need. And understanding that, conflict is not our foe. Conflict is trying to tell us something. Anyway, as always, this podcast, it's been a lot of fun sharing these ideas with you. Until next time, keep rethinking how you show up and do life.